2-Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a book or 5 books, break them down bit by bit, section by section, talk about it, analyze it, have fun, make jokes. I'm Chad Post from BOA Letter Books, not joined by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox. He is in some disarray with no heat and no hot water, which I suppose those two always go together. So instead you get Kaija Straumanis. You can be the Brian replacement for this week. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, other than I've spent the last, I think, 3 days waking up in a like sponge of piss because Alex keeps peeing, keeps coming into bed in the middle of the night and then peeing.
Okay, so aside from that great content to kick things off, like anyone who's still listening, we are into the 18th season of this show, which is the Ann Quin season, which we're doing 5 books by her. We've done Berg, we've done 3. We are today finishing Passages, and then following that, we'll be talking about Tripticks, which we'll talk about at the end of this. Kaija has our son pissing all over. I am not in that room, so I am good. I am piss-free and ready to talk about Ann Quin, I suppose. Although we should say that we have followed this since the beginning on TMR, but Brittany Griner was released in exchange for an arms dealer, which is positive in many respects, and also like does raise certain questions over as to like the fact that the U.S. has jailed people for much less, for much longer, and probably equally shitty conditions, to be honest. And releasing someone who's like branded a terrorist in exchange for someone that had been arrested on marijuana charges in the U.S. would never happen. Like,
yeah.
So
is this? I'm not sure.
It all feels a little bit weird. And I do want to point out that I do like that weed is becoming like normalized. And I want to thank you, Kaija, and all you middle-class white women for making this happen. Once you realized that weed was good, all of a sudden, all the barriers broke down. It is allowed. Gummies are everyone's favorite snack. And like, we care now. We don't care about weed. We care about profit.
And about mental health for moms. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. The only problem is that now we have to, now we have to choose between being Olympic athletes or happy. So
that'll change soon enough.
Can't travel.
That'll all be erased, I'm certain. The other thing I want to point out is that after making fun of Herschel Walker for so long, and I think we did on the podcast a few weeks ago, if not, fuck Herschel Walker, fuck college football. I also fuck Russia. So I've got like a few fucks this week of people that deserve it.
You've got a lot to give, a lot to give out.
College football is top, then Russia, then Herschel Walker maybe. But he lost, which is good for America and good for society as a whole.
Probably.
It proves that not everything is on fire, just 99.9% of the world.
Yep. If you're at worst, the rest of the world is just waking up in a little puddle of piss.
They either get pissed or terrorists.
It's a metaphor for life. And
like
speaking of metaphors,
I don't understand this book. I thought I had a grasp on it last week. I thought I was doing well. I had a lot of poetic statements to make. I think last week's TMR is like relatively nerdy and informed and learned, and I have no idea what to talk about. So we might want to go through this a bit slowly, but I also have a couple of the critical books. I didn't finish reading the second one, I forgot. But it has some interesting stuff right from the jump that I would not have known. And the basic premise of this book, just to frame it for where we were, is that there are 4 parts. There are 2 parts that are like a stream of consciousness, cinematic, sort of jump cutty, I wouldn't say journal, like more poetic sort of flow. That's generally this described as being from this woman who is looking for her brother, this is part of from the earlier thing. I don't think we mentioned this, but according to one of these critical books, who she fell in love with when he was 14, and that's when he left, and that's why she's looking for him.
Okay, which might explain a handful of things or a handful of the memories, especially in the second part, because there is always that like he, him.
Blow your mind in a few minutes with that too, though. So
yeah.
The second part to that is that so she is with a man, so presumably her lover. They're going to some sort of Mediterranean Greekish isle where there's a dictatorship, a la Donald Trump's America. I didn't get a mention. Also, fuck Donald Trump for saying that he would just get rid of the Constitution, but that one's kind of a given. So there's not a lot of hate for that one, or not a lot of like surprise in that. It's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But a very fascist sort of dictatorship in which possibly her brother was a rebel, was jailed, or was killed. The other two parts of the book that alternate are a journal that seems to be from the male, the he that is along with her, that sort of interstitially fixes questions of logic related to the more stream of consciousness sections, but nevertheless is just pretty much anecdotes and observations and like dreams, stories, and a lot of sex things, and also has commentary along the side. Now, the first thing I want to break down here in relation to that was something that we did not mention that we should. Wouldn't have known this. I've not read this book. So this is from Amongst Those Left by Francis Booth. In the section, the first paragraph on passages says that he talks about the way that they have that passages like 3 contains more than one type of narrative, one being a journal, and 3 characters, one of whom does not appear, but whose absence dominates the book. Again, the different narratives alternate, although this time there are only 2 types, and the journal sections are annotated, recalling 2 other narratives about journeys of both literal and metaphorical through strange lands. Malcolm Lowry's Across the Panama, and that story's inspiration, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Lowry's story is similar to passages in that its annotations combine quotations, in Lowry's case from The Ancient Mariner, and extracts from a book about the country in which the journey is set, with the narrator's thoughts, which refer obliquely to the journal entries.
I see.
So there's that.
So she is pulling some stylistic things from others.
Yeah, and then there's a footnote that says the quotes in passages are taken from. I really wish people proofed these Delkey books at this point in time. The quotes from passages are taken from Jane Harrison's Prolegomena to the Study of Greek Religion. Passages may, however, not be set in Greece, as its reviewers assumed, but in Lowry's Central America or Mexico, which is what Quin actually knew.
Interesting. I started looking up yesterday, or tried to start looking up, but the thing that this reminded me the most was what the book Open Letter published, Why I Killed My Best Friend, Amanda Michalopoulou, and like the junta, the whole, I don't want to say the whole thing and trivialize it, but it very much made me think of that sort of Hellenic revolution, dictatorship, coup, switching of governments, but I mean, also Mexico.
Mexico, so Latin America, though, has these sort of things. I mean, I don't know. Let's just point out yesterday, to continue with the fuck things, the Peruvian president tried to eliminate their constitution and take over the country, and was arrested and detained and not allowed to do such. So this is kind of a threat. Putin's threatening that we're closer and closer to nuclear war. All these dictators are bad. And meanwhile, proofing Point Counterpoint, which has a stand-in for Nicholas Mosley's dad, Sir Oswald Mosley, in the Brown Shirts and the Fascists, in which a character talks explicitly and in many pages about the sort of philosophical rationale for fascism and why it's better than democracy. So like I'm into this world.
Yeah. Apparently. Would this be a good moment to plug Joao Reis's Devastation of Silence?
Sure. I can't figure out how to tie it into the White Lotus, but I will soon enough.
This book or Devastation of Silence?
This book. We've had White Lotus content on every episode, but
I mean, they're in a hotel. They're in hotel rooms, and I'll tie it in for you. I'll tie it in for you a little bit. So the thing that until it got to the really rapey parts, the thing that I most often thought of while reading this half of the book is the TV show Schitt's Creek, which you have not watched. But if you look at any memes, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you also, but the second full paragraph on page 57, where supposedly it's the guy saying, "Another hotel I can't get attached to," he said, stuffing newspaper to the keyhole. And then, "The climate is quite unbearable. How long must we endure it?" And it just sounds, and on page 59 too, like it just sounds like the brother and the sister from Schitt's Creek. And if you look up any memes, any clips from the TV show, the brother is very sort of fussy. I would say they're a rich family who has been knocked down financially. They're fussy. They're staying in this roadside motel in this town that their dad bought as a joke. It's like off the map.
It's kind of derivative of Arrested Development.
Sure.
Throwing a little shade.
Yes. But then the sister, her sort of catchphrase of anything is just going, "Ew, David," and that's her thing always. And I hear their voices in this third part of the woman writing, just like this like rich people in this like upturned world of revolution going on in this country that isn't theirs, and it's another hotel, and everyone around them is poor. And then there's this very Jane Austen moment where the gypsies come at them and sort of surround them, and they run away. And that's afterward where they're talking, and he's basically like, "Ugh, what do you expect? Like, you know, they think we're stupid for giving them so much money." And that is the White Lotus tie-in for me, is rich people being in for what we understand and see, a poor country, or surrounded by less fortunate people, just like running around.
Yeah, I have something to add. I think there are two impulses within all the Quin books so far. One is to disrupt the bourgeois middle class, especially
they're super disrupted, super disrupted in this part.
The second is conflict with the other. So in Berg, it's the homeless men, or I forget what they're called, but like that attack him. In 3, it's the people who throw dirt and break all the windows. And then here it is both the government, but also some of the other people around. I want to make another comment that, and this is a throwback that Brian should be here for, is that I think, like at the end of, I mean, I should map this out before I say this. I don't know shit. I'm wrong, but like, I don't care. At the end of Twin Peaks: The Return, the last 2 episodes are the exact same length. And if you put those 2 episodes on top of each other and watch them simultaneously, they seem to like mirror the same journey from different perspectives and different philosophical and whatever perspectives. And if you go to page 62, one of the first things I marked in her section was this one about like, "From the balcony, I saw the whiteness of waves lift over, spread along the coast." Then she says, "I saw the girl's body he had raped. She was no longer paralyzed, but danced, then knelt in front of him." If you go to the journal at almost the exact same symmetrical place, he talks about having sex with this girl and who's utterly motionless, and yet I could feel her orgasm several times, the heat, the flow, overwhelmed by the sense of feeling her coming before me and with me. Finally, I got up and the 2 women appeared. It was then I noticed the girl was paralyzed from the waist down as the women supported her across the room into the second one and out on the balcony, where she turned and smiled at me. Then a few pages later, there is a scene about dancing that's like him dancing with her, and also leads into like I don't know if it's a rape so much as like a sexual activity, but it's something very masculine. Where is it? I'm not finding it. It's a little bit.
Isn't that the dream though?
It's on page 85.
Isn't that the dream though that he's describing?
With the girl, the paralyzed girl?
Yeah.
Yeah. It says it's a dream. Like she describes it here almost as if it's happened. And this is okay. So there's two more radical things I want to say. One is, so she goes in this section to try and like find out what happens to her brother. Obviously, it's a whole story. And there we get a sequence of references to bullets and walls, lots of bullets and walls. There's bullets throughout the second half, like maybe like 10, 15 times the word bullets shows up, frequently lodged in walls or bullet holes that are in walls. It talks to various people, various police people, and tries to see different images, find out who died. And there keeps being these references to like the gun going off and like as if her brother had been shot and killed. I believe that the he of this, the narrator, kills her. I believe that the gun going off and the guns that go off in his section are him killing her. And then the second part of that, to make this uber complicated and to synthesize, is that I don't think there are two characters. I think this is one character split into two senses of being, one that's searching and one that's dominating. And that eventually they kill the one that's looking for this redemption, this fact of finding the brother, of becoming whole, of getting like that sense of security and completeness, is murdered because that is impossible. And instead, the male-dominated half-ass force is the one that remains speaking at the
end. Okay, so you're and join us next week. So that, yeah, and you're talking in a metaphorical.
All the references to the Greek references within the journal section are to Antigone of burying the brother to get closure, to like end that myth and end that sequence, and then to Medusa and Perseus murdering and killing Medusa, which he sort of implies the she in this book is frequently made into a Medusa sort of figure, one who can like squeeze them in, take over things, the statuesque part, the acting part, the mask part, like all these things sort of like kind of map onto one another. And so that is my new belief.
Okay. Speaking metaphorically, I can buy into that because you also have the repetition of lines and sentiments such as a head with the body attached later. And so like kind of like Lego people. And also on 107 toward the end of the book, what you're to, bolster what you're saying, 3 little sections down, he or the person writes the question then, who is it today that inhabits me?
Yep.
But there's also, yeah, man, I don't know. So a lot of the parts about the girl and the two different people in these last two parts, I thought a lot of it had to do also with the mirror that is placed at the end of the bed.
It's a lot in front of mirrors in this section.
Yeah, a lot of that in front of mirrors, which okay. But that like the duality of like the reflection of a reflection of a reflection and how many people are in the room, like 2 physical people, 2 mirror people, that sort of stuff. So I could buy into your theory.
One of the things we haven't talked about at all, I don't think, is the influence of R.D. Laing on Ann Quin. So R.D. Laing was a psychologist, maybe psychiatrist, but whatever, and writer from the 60s who wrote a book called The Divided Self that's about this sort of splitting of consciousness, and is one of the people who's behind the sort of framing that like we think people are insane, but really they're sane. That's just their reaction to insane sort of moments. Right. Is this bifurcation in which you end up with not what we would want to call schizophrenia, because it's not schizophrenia, but a schizoid personality in which you have, because of a trauma, the loss of a brother, you split into 2 different personalities, one that searches, one that dominates. You split those, you keep splitting as things happen, and that to become like a whole self would be, the integrated self would be the goal. And yet at the same time, the way that we treat madness, in his argument, is that we are reinforcing madness by putting people into hospitals and treating only a part of this problem and not the idea of it becoming back together. This is 25 year ago memory of reading this book and real quick cursory thing. So anyone who's listening that wants to correct me, go right ahead. But this is, I think, the general gist of what I remember from reading that, and that he was kind of a radical, like more Marcusean sort of side of things. So he plays in this, and if you take this book in that light, it starts to make a lot more sense, because if you do take these books and put them next to each other, they start to bleed together. You had mentioned you thought the second half of this was like in the future.
I mean, but it's not. I thought it was maybe like months and months later, but it's like it's all chronological as far as we know, because the section from last week ends in August, and then his journal starts in September.
Fair enough.
So there's something I want to ask about in regard to the journaling part, but I do want to ride your idea a little bit more, and say that I'm on board with it. Going back to the introduction and how Claire Louise Bennett talks about like Quin's prose is atomized, kaleidoscopic. It on page
6.
Thank you.
You know how to read a clock?
On page VI, bottom of VI, top of VII. I do know how to read a clock. I have regular numbers. So she talks about how, shake your head, talks about how the writing, like kind of arguing against people saying, critics saying how Ann Quin was borrowing from Nathalie Surratt, how Quin was infected with idiosyncratic disdain for inverted commas, et cetera, et cetera. But then Claire Louise Bennett is saying, to my mind, these derisive evaluations fail to take into account the impact that one's domestic setup has on what and how one writes. And then further down, on the one hand, it's an abrasive and in-your-face world for a working class environment, yet at the same time, much of it seems alien and is completely uninvolving, overwhelmed and understimulated all at the same time. She talks about, polyvocal, idiosyncratic, experimental, the walls are paper thin, you rarely have any privacy, buffers, and that can all go into that as well. Like you're saying, it's not a madness, it's just a reality. That's how you think and how you hear. You have multiple ideas bouncing around at the same time.
Or like what would be commonplace at the time in terms of like trendy psychological thought would be that you are multiple personalities, but you are not one. And in some ways this like goes for and against the Artie Laing thing and against like the idea of integration, but that one is different things in different circumstances and that one is multiple. And this is the Kathy Acker bit of like Kathy Acker, how many Kathy Ackers are there? Which Kathy Acker do you want to talk to sort of idea.
Yeah,
and then,
I am multitudes, yeah.
And in regards to that, like one of the things that the Kathy Acker line to it involves is the idea of plagiarizing and using other people's words and making them part of your persona, which then the Lowry / I'm the Ancient Mariner / all that part sort of fits in here too, as like the incorporation of something that can make one of yourselves rather than a singular self, especially in a world that is broken. Fuck capitalism. Is that 6?
That's number 6. I'm going to add cats to your list, if I may.
Ohio does.
Let's do it. So the thing I want to ask about is that, so the what we've been traditionally referring to as the him of this book, the journaler, the chronicler, the expositionist, seems just like this kind of, especially even at the beginning of the 3rd section, where he, like on page 60, he's like, who's to know, your brother might have been one of these, missing, possibly shot, dead while trying to escape. Are you feeling okay? I'm like, he's such a dick. Like he seems like this rich sort of fuckboy dick, but then all of a sudden he becomes a PI and is actually trying to track down, and he's been going around to these orgies and then also like talking to people and trying to track down her brother. So like I have no idea
and like
anymore.
Put these two together as one consciousness or one being. It starts to make more sense. The fact that they never really sleep together in this book. They're always like, they do maybe with the dancing thing, and maybe occasionally, but for the most part, it's always like she goes off to these people And then he has this other sort of persona. And even within the sentences that switch between she, he, I, they, like that sort of repetition becomes almost like it is within her head, where she says, you know what, your brother, saying to yourself, like, you know, he's dad. Like you're here on this trip, then he's dad. And then thinking to yourself, are you okay? Maybe let's just get another drink. Let's just like settle down and not like get to that conclusion yet. There's a way that I could see a mind talking to itself in terms of both seeing itself that the brother, no, this is valid. The brother will be okay. I'm not going to quite acknowledge that yet. Here's how my self-care works is through getting drunk and fucking random strangers and like various orgies.
Yeah. I mean,
sexuality is very much like where their identity seems to be wedded in this book is through the sexuality.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that these last parts, like finally there is more of a stable lover aspect or not just for him, but for both of them. Like page 66, I have underlined that I think the first full paragraph to me definitely 100% was a threesome. Like I was talking last week, that's something that I would have expected to see or read in 3. But I guess that's too easy then. But I thought that there was a lot more going on between the two of them. Like they're
him have a threesome.
Yeah, it's the mirror also.
Last week we talked about the part where he's like having a threesome with these 2 women, and I felt like this was the part of like her seeing that from the outside, even if it is an individual seeing themselves from the outside, which starts to make like that dissociation, I think, puts a frame on this that allows like a lot of the like truly poetic and like not batshitty, but like hard to comprehend obfuscated things into a framework that you can sort of, and maybe it's cheap. It's sort of like, in some ways, maybe that's as cheap as being like, it was all a dream sort of idea. But like, there's enough textual evidence in this book that like the he, she's are conflated and like are malleable, are like fluid in a way that like is really extreme, that you can read it as one general space of consciousness of going through a passage, going through a tunnel, an experience, a thing. This is a chronicle of that kind of passage of these parts trying to integrate. I'm trying to find the part where I think he kills her, but he says somewhere in the journal, and it may not be near the end, but it may be before that. He'd forgotten, yes, 91. He had forgotten the revolver was loaded. He played with the safety catch as usual. At last, he said, as he heard the gun go off inside his head. That's one of the ones I started thinking like, oh shit, like maybe all this gun reference isn't necessarily just about people killing the brother, but of the self of the he killing aspects of itself or itself.
Right. Yeah. I thought the gun was
a penis.
I think everything's a penis.
Was it Chekhov? Did you think it was Chekhov?
It's Chekhov's penis. I thought that I don't know, it seemed sort of to fit into his kind of PI-esque role. But also, I mean, they're trapped in this city. So I don't know, the gun, I didn't put that much weight on it. I mean, you have him playing with it in the journal parts. You have her playing with it as kind of like a safety. But that could be, again, like you're saying, the personas or the personalities fighting against each other.
He's going to become integrated.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't know that there's necessarily a killing so much as if you look at page 79, the last paragraph of her section versus page 108, the last paragraph of his. Hers is another city, some hotel. She would pace the rooms. He'd continue with his notes. She smiled across at him and took hold of his hand. He placed her fingers against his lips. I saw her face in the window in profile. Her hand came up, raised as if to strike out, but passed slowly across his head, through his hair, and swung further down as the train halted on a high bank overlooking a vast stretch of sea. So again, you have like reflections in the window, profiles and stuff. And that coming from an all things considered incredibly turbulent section of all these, like I said, rapey parts, be they actual or imagined or just because there are parts even where in those I wasn't sure if she hadn't maybe wound up in an orgy, like followed him to one of his parties and just gotten wrapped up in that. And that could also, I do like your idea, that could also go into, it's like wrong place, wrong time for the personality of, for the persona of she. Like she's not built for the orgies, but the him is built for that. And sorry, but the last page, he has a new order of space, and then the last paragraph. So let us begin another journey. Change the setting. Everything is changing. The country, the climate.
Hold on. I want to go into this more specifically, but stop right there for a second. So both of them talk about the same thing as you're saying of like moving on, another city, some hotel. Let us begin another journey. That implies that the journey that one was on is ended, in which I feel like this book has like that's the way that like if part of the social contract with the novel is that the novel has a conclusion. If the novel, if you can call it a novel because it has some sort of way that you can logically, emotionally, structurally say this is a thing, even if it has like loose ends and threads and intertextuality, it at least like has to pretend that there's a whole, that this is the end of one journey, and then the next journey is to begin. And so in theory, to build into this theory that I came up with like on the spot, to be honest,
just this morning
is just as we started, to be fair.
Sorry, that's what I mean, like for my morning is now.
Yeah, morning, but like not like pre-morning, like this morning. The idea that like that there is something that this passage of these two things has reached some sort of conclusion, and that they continue to go on another journey, because like one's journey never ends. Life doesn't end until life ends. However, they do have some sort of quasi resolution between the two parts, or this quest. Like if this were framed as like a knight's quest, you have 4 parts, which is traditional in like a knight's quest. They have like a goal, find the brother, go through different like slows of despond, whatever. You have these issues and the obstacles that one faces, and then you have like the reward and the resolution. And that's not clear in here. And maybe it is clear in here, but like in a way that we're not looking at it. But to her, this book was finished. And to the reader, you could just be like, it's just part of an endless journey of the same manipulations of sex and violence and fascism and control and external, like trying to get out of that control and of trying to find an answer and trying to find integration. And this doesn't end. It goes in circles and waves and circles and waves. And that feels more like what this book is doing, as its 4-part sort of circular structure.
Yeah, the sea and the waters are never ending. You're forever navigating on that ship, forever navigating. And you kept saying resolution, but I almost feel like it's I don't want to even say stalemate. I feel like it's a timeout, because I feel there was all this turbulence, and then to use your tract of like finding the overly male in texts and narratives, is I feel like there's all this turbulence, and then all of a sudden you have the him voice saying a new order of space, just like done. And then very kind of like, so let us begin another journey. Change the setting. Everything is changing. The country, the climate, there's no compromise, no country we can return to. She still has her obsession and fantasies to live out. For myself, there's less of an argument. I'm committed to this moment. So like, yeah, it's kind of like they've both, I feel like the tension. Yeah, I don't know that resolution would be the word I would choose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm using resolution in the sense that like a traditional novelistic narrative involves a resolution. Or at least even it's a conclusion. Like even if you don't feel like something has been resolved, there are the discussion around the resolution. There's some way in which that is a piece of a conventional novel,
right?
And she's rebelling against that like there's that great line that I think I named the system. I named the episode after. I would like to exhaust the limits of the possible, which is what's going on. And yet, if you put it into that frame of what is a conventional novel and a resolution, it implies that there's a resolution. Like what you're saying, the new space and the moving on. There's an implied resolution that, as a first-time reader, I don't think would feel like obvious.
No,
I mean, the first time I read this book, and even this time I read this book, I was just like, it's just a thing. Like it's a very Walter Benjamin sort of thing, like passing through these different influences that come on you. But like, I don't know, it's interesting. The one, related to that. So this one, 87, was one of the ones where I did, looking back, start to think that this is more of a schizoid personality and less of separate people. The problem is to discover whether I can live with this woman's demons without forfeiting my own.
Yeah. I in that sentence, I underlined the word problem, because I thought it was really fascinating that was the word choice. The problem is to discover. That's not conventional wording. That's not standard. I don't know what it usually would be, like the plan, the hope, the idea, the I don't know, but yeah, the problem. I did at the very end. Sorry?
Go on.
I did also at the very end write that they both seem manic, like BPD or bipolar. So that's not that far off from what you're saying.
The Artie Laing argument that filtered through my psychology mentor is that all of those terms are just other terms for this basic problem of splitting. Depression, anxiety, bipolar, all those things are just parts of looking at the elephant, like one flashlight on the elephant of the general problem of it's very difficult to be integrated in a world that wants to fragment you. And to talk about the postmodernism, which Brian has brought up several times, isn't necessarily just an artistic, aesthetic quirk or type of structure, but is the feeling that at that point in time in the 60s, the goal was to like take individuals that had been like the 50s strong, singular individual. What is the morals? What is the fabric? Everything's agreed to and singular, and destroy that. Because the second that you are a piece of something, if I can make you a desiring engine of a fancy car, I can sell you that car. If I can make you this, and you don't want people to be a whole integrated, healthy self. You want people to be fractured, fragmented, incomplete, and then they're able to be manipulated by fascists and by capitalism, of which I don't know that there's a huge difference. Fuck both those things again. Those are already 2 and 6, so it doesn't really make any difference. But the idea like that is part of the postmodern condition, is that things are piecemeal. And this book reads that way.
Yeah, I feel like there may have been something, like you said, fractured. I feel like there may have been some sort of image where something was shattered, but it could be something else that I read.
Not a mirror. It should be
the
a
what?
mirror.
More mirrors, yeah. A broken mirror. I mean, right opposite from what you were just talking about, page 86, it's less about fractioning, but I do have in the margin written for the last paragraph on page 86, relationships based on the master-slave situation. If you look at this from what you're saying of like, even just like society, the world to the person, roles reversed from day to day. As soon as one wakes up, the way the blankets have been taken over, the first one to get up, the role begins from there. And in the margin, I have like gender, marriage, relationship hierarchies, politics, society. So yeah, there's
binomials.
What?
Binomials, the things that like are X versus Y, or instead of this or this, slave or master, rather than the and, in which if you replace those ors, it's her or him, it's alive or dead with ands. This book starts to become a very like quantum sort of philosophical, existentially fragmented book. She and he are there. They are one. They like, there's a way that you can transition that like slave master into they are the master slave, because that roles seem to reverse. Like where even if it's dream and reality are two things that are at odds with each other. So she sees in reality him raping a paralyzed woman. He has a dream of raping a paralyzed woman, which reads like reality, more so than her thing does.
The mirror again.
Anns and Anns.
Yeah, the mirror stuff again, the masks again. I found on page 84, not fragmenting, but there are a couple spots where they both talk about slowly beginning to cut other shapes from each other. And that's kind of, second paragraph down on 84. In her nakedness, she presents to him the surface of marble, which he slowly begins to cut other shapes from. So there's your fragmentation.
Yeah, and like the shaving off. Here's another gun one that I had marked as on 85. Hot face against the gun's cool metal. The sound of the safety catch. He put his tongue along the trigger, poked it in the barrel. Ah, what happiness, he said, watching the whole performance in the mirror. The relationship between gun and performance and the safety, and him, it's so rife through here that you really could take not a thesis per se, but like an essay on what's going on with this gun shooting thing exactly, and where's it popping up? I have to say, I'm going to jump ahead because I don't want it to get fucked up by any means, but 84 has my line of the week, which is somewhere there seems to be a maladjustment.
Yeah, I laughed the first time I read that, and then I thought maybe I shouldn't have laughed. But I think
what I'm saying now. I initially was just like, that's baller. Sort of like there's a line of excess within limitations, or what's it? Excess within limitation. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like that old joke that I always talk about of you should do moderation moderately. I'll have 2 drinks tonight, have 400 and then not drink for another year, but have 400 and tell your friend what you really think. Because everything is excess once in a while.
I don't know if you can see it, but next to that line,
Chad, me?
No, Chad, etc.
Okay, etc.
Have access within limitation because of that thing that you just quoted. That line.
Yeah, my favorite part of that is instead of just taking a mushroom and feeling good about
all of them,
the whole bag, you see fucking God.
Can I do my favorite line just in case? Okay, so it is. I actually dog-eared it. Okay, 81. The thing I like the best. The first entry in Sunday. Living with a woman is one thing. The innumerable questions asked of one. Traveling with her is quite another thing. The answers expected.
Yeah. Yep.
And there was even with that, there's
so if Ann Quin is splitting into what's the female perspective, this male perspective, and this within her framework as a self divided, that's really interesting. That becomes the book becomes doubly interesting to me, more than just as I really appreciate his parts more than hers. Quotes are on his and hers and parts, but the journal entries, the sort of anecdotal, anecdotal, what's the word I'm looking for? The just aphorisms and the aphorisms and the quick little scenes. Even I think the one that is one of my favorites of that is the dancing one, which I think is just really good, is on 85. He was tired. She said he was jealous. He repeated he was very tired. Very well, let me stay on, she said. No, you would only feel abandoned. She was drunk and dizzy with alcohol and music. Her feet and body, it seemed, had no sense of gravity. He remained rigid, pale amid shapes and shadows of columns and people. Why don't you join in? Oh, you and your middle-class Jewish upbringing. Even if you do get drunk, you watch yourself, never a step out of place. That's your trouble. Later, much later, 2 days afterwards, he forced her body to dance under him, which is another one of the rapey scenes, but it's also that's an interesting, the column versus the dancing, the lightness versus the heaviness. Yeah. And then the conjugation of the two becoming, he forced her to dance under him, but they are at least together at that point, perhaps.
Yeah. And it was unclear to me if it was I'm lost for words because the forcing her to dance. It's the thing, like it, by all sounds of it, it's rapey. It's just rape. Like there's so many spots in these last two.
There's so much stuff
where I'm just like, I think she's just consistently like, whoever she goes to, she's being raped by. But then else in his sections, he makes a comment sort of toward the end that she doesn't, page 95, she walks through narrow streets, enters dilapidated buildings, talks with government officials, looks at a dozen or so men lined against a wall. They all think her mad, very beautiful, untouchable, except by those who say they have information. So she just like essentially not selling, but using her body as currency to get supposed information about her brother. Like she seems so far gone in these last two parts of the book. And that's why it's so arresting, where the last paragraphs of both of their parts are just like, it's a new day, new journey. It's like,
isn't that part of kind of the traditional classical, even like comedics, the idea of like the comedy of like an ending that has then this happily ever after sort of vibe to it, of the trauma, like the discord, and then but like it's sort of like to parody it in a way that becomes commercially successful. It's like the Iowa writing school of like at the end of the day, they're like, I had an epiphany. I stood on the cliff and I looked out at the sea and I felt the world come through and I understand, and we just keep going, and life is life, and you just go through. Like it's sort of bullshit. And that's what makes me think that it's like a signal of like you missed out on where the resolution might have been.
Yeah.
Or there is no such thing as resolution, and all of this is just an insane person going through a next cycle of insanity. Of I am one. Let's go on a journey. Boom, break apart. Have all these things happen. Back together. Boom, let's go on another journey, and that's an endless cycle as well. So like a Freeman's Wake reading of the whole thing. But I also like we talked last week briefly. I want to add to this of like whether the book is sexy or like a turn on. The 69 been on.
Sorry, had to.
Turn on.
Woo-hoo. That's all it takes.
Turn on. There's one other, so like spirals, circles of blueness he thrust away, turned and buried his head between her legs, while she took the other in her mouth. Very simplistic and yet provocatively sexy. There's another.
Wait, that's not on 69.
What? It's on 66.
Oh, okay. I was like, hold on a second. Yeah, I had that underlined as well.
6.
I had that under Buffalo 66. I have that underlined as well, and that's the one where I said I have it written 100% threesome. But yeah, I mean all of that.
Oh, like I was taking that as a 69-ish example.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because even starting, did you start with just his shadow against hers until the form of 3 covered the space between the space between door and window, between his thrusts?
Watching. And the cigarette smoke curl.
Yeah.
There's another one where it's like, oh God, it's super hot too. Hold on.
Yeah, that one was pretty hot. Yeah,
that one's pretty hot. But there's another one that's like takes a smallness in her mouth. Shit, where is it? That was one that I was like, oh boy.
Oh boy. Oh jeepers.
I think another line of the week would be very few people now allow themselves to get drunk.
Yeah, I underlined that too.
Hey, women are making us do weed all the time.
Yeah. Page 70. Is
it 70?
For me, it was 70. At the bottom of 70, where it feels like, the bottom of 70 to me felt like the only, or one of the only pro female things in the book, or pro woman. So in the mirror he had propped up at the end of the bed, she saw angles of her own body that surprised. Parts he and others had delighted in. He watched his movements and her face as she watched her own. Shifting around, she saw her legs, his back, and later the cliff. Parts had fallen in, and so on and so on. That I thought was A, hot, but also B, it might be the only moment where the her character, her persona gets to appreciate itself in this, reflective light of how other people see and have seen her. There's almost a gentleness to it.
Here's mine. Here's like there's a gentleness to it. It's nice. I like that. I had that one underlined as well. That's not the one I was thinking of. This is the one where I was like, yep. After his hand there. Wait, sorry.
Yep. I know the part. Yep.
Body still twitched. Hers, she surrendered to. The spasms he manipulated. Afterwards, his hand there, wanting to sense what it was like, asking her to take his smallness in her mouth. The growth filled her. Legs round him. He carried her toward the mirror. Yeah.
Yep. I did like the line, the spasms he manipulated, because there was like
spasms he manipulated is like,
that's hot.
You're fucking good, if you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. There's another one.
This is an X-rated edition. Welcome to the X-rated edition of TMR. We are soon to be banned on YouTube for
NSF. Wait, NSFW? Yeah, NSFW.
Does that phrase even mean anything? Not safe for work? Like, who goes to work? Like, who's in the office where people are like, are you looking at? I mean, aside from Kanye, fuck Kanye.
Yeah.
Kanye.
That's
anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck Kanye.
Mm-hmm.
Cancel Kanye forever. Anyone who listens to his albums now, I curse you. There's me now. I curse you. I hope you get Yee disease. Oh boy, we're going off the rails here. Welcome to when we're in different time zones. My
God.
But literally fuck Kanye. But and his everything about him and everything about Joe Rogan and everything about all of this is so goddamn stupid and like unnecessary and awful and wrong for all sorts of reasons. Anyways, that's a public service announcement moment. In terms of this, I don't know. This was always my least favorite book of hers.
Mm-hmm.
And it might still be my least favorite book of hers, but I feel like through this, I have a better appreciation and understanding of it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my first time reading it, but I do like 3 better. But there are, I do like 3 better.
3 was my first.
Mm-hmm.
So also, like, not to make this sound weird, but like 3 was my first, but Tripticks was my best. And Tripticks is what's next.
Tripticks is just a fancy word for 3.
Tripticks is just a fancy word for 3. Got images that seem like they're out of like Sonic Youth Goo albums. We've got writing that's typewritten. It's the one that's not as internal, that is more external and more like, I think in my mind, and I haven't reread this since we reissued it, which was a million years ago now. So I haven't reread it since then. However, in my mind, it is the one that is the least internalized in terms of the monologue and the sort of like poetic nature of it, the most punk rock, and the most extensive taking of her ideas about self, sexuality, 3 like watching and having complicated relations with other human beings and taking it to the extreme and adding in, instead of like just having journals, like we have like everything in passages in 3 is written. Even if they're watching movies, it's a written description of a movie that doesn't differ that much from the audio tapes, which are also written, and doesn't differ that much from the cinematic takes in passages where like it reads like a movie, like where like sit at a bar, take a drink, sees him over there, person comes in, dead body on the floor. Like it's very much like this cut kind of cinematic imagery. And I think Tripticks is the first one that adds in visual, that it becomes multimedia in a way that I think alters the game on what she's capable of approaching. And if Pat is about a split South, I think Tripticks is about a split society. This is my guess.
Okay.
I don't remember. I'm just throwing it out there. No one's listening to this.
Place your bets now.
We always wait for my hipster song to end the podcast.
Yeah, that's only why. Yeah, man, I'm sort of distracted by trying to find. I feel like there were a couple more sentences or parts where I underlined and thought these are super hot. But also now I'm looking back through and seeing all the mental health things and feeling really, really bad about that. Like page 64 and 65, where he says, you see, I'm on the edge, just one push or step. And then he asks, do you think you know the dark part of me? And then on 65.
64, do you think we take on each other's madness?
Yeah, also, yeah. Yes. And then, do you think you know the dark part of me? And then on page 65, I feel there's a hole in me somewhere that's dripping something out little by little. Like, that's so depressing and so, like, it's worse than, like, what's worse than having a hole? A leaky hole. Like, that's
it's not, let's not say that phrase again right now. I'll just leave you guys.
Do the record scratch that. No,
let's not put a leaky hole. On page at the beginning of Tripticks, just to give you guys a bit of a teaser, I have many names, many faces. At the moment, my number one ex-wife and her schoolboy gigolo are following a particularity of flesh, attired in a gray suit and bottom-down Brooks Brothers shirt. Time checked 14.04 hours Central Standard Time, 73 degrees outside. Area 158,693 square miles, which 1,890 square miles are water. Natural endowments are included in 20 million acres of public reservations. Let's fucking do this. So next week for the first half of Tripticks, has a lot of images. It's got this like weird, which I have forever and a day associated this with Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, it's exactly what it looks like.
Because of the Phil Collins song and the Ronald Reagan's, what was that song? I don't even remember, but I'll find it for next week. But
yeah, I don't know, but it should be the intro.
You know what the music video is for that? The Reagan parody video? Oh shit. Okay. I know you have a dentist appointment to get to. Anyone that's listening still, like us, rate us, review us, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your arch nemesis to listen to the podcast. Go to Patreon, support us, $3 a month. It goes a long way. It's helped get us microphones, at least one, and one that we're not using. However, that's okay. It is valuable to us to know that you actually appreciate what we're doing. This is extra and additional and just like a fun thing that we want to provide for the world. And there will be new information, new changes about 2 Month Review coming in whatever the next year is, 2023.
Yes. All year.
12
months of it. Also, I will plug that today is the last day for week 3 of Open Letters Overstock sale. Yeah. And if you are watching anytime, and by the time this is a downloadable audio podcast, week 4 will be live. Week 4 of Overstock.
60% off.
Yes, 12 new books, 60% off, and they're only 60% off for the week that that sale is live. So week 3 ends today. Week 4 will be live.
And as a person who chooses which books end up in which weeks, I have to say I've been saving some good ones for week 4 and week 5. So pay attention, buy them, give presents, donate to Open Letter through the University of Rochester. Give us a rating. Give us 5 stars. I like 5 stars. If you give us less than 5 stars, I will come find you. I'm not a nice person. I'm Chad Post. I'm signing off. Passage through whatever. I got no final joke. Do you, Kaija?
Never.